Hi and welcome. Thank you for joining me. I am Joelle Hill, an owner and founder of Hill Family Sleep Solutions, and I am a certified child sleep consultant and adult sleep coach. So thank you for joining me today. I am going to share my screen, and today's topic, we're going to be talking about screens and sleep. So I think that's up. So we're talking about screens and sleep. I'm hoping that today come away with what you need to know about the impact on screens on our sleep and ways to make changes. So I am keeping this conversation or this presentation quite um, broad for typical sleep, adult sleep, neurodiverse individuals experiencing neurodiversity, um, sensitive sleepers, keeping it quite broad so that you can take away some of the information um, and apply it to you and not be specific. So first of all, this presentation is not shameful. So screens have allowed us to survive this past 2 years. I'm recording this in spring of 2022. Um, there's absolutely no shame in what we've been doing up until this point, too, because it's been survival in terms of our screen usage for working and homework online, connecting with others, and allowing us to spend some time, allow to using our time together. So this we're starting to come out of the pandemic, and this is a great time to have a conversation about what our current screen usage um, the impact of our current screen usage is, and to give some information about the effects and some strategies to come out. If you're thinking about that, now might be the right time to make some changes towards better sleep. So today we'll talk about what the impact of screens has on our sleep in terms of um, that overall screen usage and how the electronics themselves impact us. I would be amiss if I didn't talk a little bit about our overall screen sleep hygiene. We can't blame everything on screens. And we're going to discuss the difference and impact of interactive screen time versus passive screen time, and tips for moving screens away from bedtime. And if you must use technology, I'm going to share some tips for using technology at night. So I'm hoping that today you'll leave with some information that will help you come up with some sort of awareness of the impact of screens and some ideas that you can take away from today. When I work with families, I always talk about the impact of screens as a piece of the puzzle um, of what might be going on, because sleep is not is complex with many factors, and definitely screens are one of them, especially with the increase of usage overall for everyone. So we all know how we feel when we don't have a good night's sleep in terms of our brain fog and our energy levels and our um, the way we interact with our people in our lives. Um, but more specifically, we know how we feel, and so when we have a bad night's sleep, we recognize that we've had a bad night's sleep and make adjustments during our day to compensate for that overtiredness. However, if you're chronically having difficulty with sleep, um, you might need to do some additional changes to some additional support to help you make some changes if it's a chronic sleep issue. And for me, I define chronic sleep issue as over 3 months. So anything under that and is related to an injury or short-term pain or a short-term transition or an adjustment or increased bout of mood altering like anxiety, or if you've moved or something stressful has happened in your life, sleep generally comes back to what it was before, if it's within 3 months. If you're having sleep difficulties longer than 3 months, you might want to reach out for some additional support to make some significant shifts and adjustments. So while screens are a part of the puzzle, they are definitely not, they can't be the cause of all sleep difficulties. So just touching base briefly, um, there's a link between dementia in terms of our cognition and learning. There's a link between dementia and poor sleep as we age. So thinking about that as if you're thinking about someone who's young and having difficulty with sleep, thinking of that long-term impact of what that might be as they age. With the physical aspects, there's more than there's a lot of impact to our physical body when we don't sleep well. Our metabolisms don't function as effectively, and we don't feel rested. So we're not ready to take on the day. We're not ready to move our body more because we're not feeling well. We're most likely to have health factors if our immune systems aren't running optimally. We'll get sick longer or longer more often because our bodies. Our body's not ready to rejuvenate itself to be working more optimally. The HGH growth hormone is something that is released at night during our sleep. So this is more specific to children who have growing, developing bodies. Thinking about if you're not sleeping as well or as much or as often, your body has less opportunities for the HGH growth hormone to be released into the body. So making our stature smaller and more petite, and not growing as much. So there's a relationship between not sleeping well and weight gain and high blood pressure and high and heart rate variability differences. And it comes from more than being sedentary. It's from being as well some high stress hormones that are being released, which I'll talk about a little bit more later. And then of course our interactions with others and how we're a little bit more have increased emotions in terms of responses to the things in our life, reduced eye contact, reduced social cues with those around us, as well as the more difficulty with regulating your own behaviors. So absolutely the impact of screens on sleep is poor quality sleep. So when we have screens in our lives, and especially at night, our bodies have less deep sleep and less REM sleep. So our stages of sleep, during our stages of sleep, we have about 5 to 7 cycles of sleep during our overnight sleep. And each cycle has stages of sleep within it. So that's where we have deep sleep and REM sleep in each cycle. Deep sleep happens more deep sleep happens in the first half of the night, and more REM sleep or dream sleep happens in the second half of the night. So if we're having if we're falling asleep later and having less sleep overall, we're more likely to have less deep sleep. And in our deep sleep, we that's where our body is taking our experiences and our learning from the day and moving it into our memory and our and keeping it into our long-term memory. So it's important. That's an important aspect. Overall, if we're having less sleep, we're not preparing our body to sleep at the optimum time. So the screens are keeping us alert, keeping us active, keeping us refreshing the screen, hitting the button, and encouraging us to fall asleep later, so we're not getting the full recommended hours of sleep. During our stages of sleep, our sleep cycles, we're more likely to have night wakes or waking up or interruptions in our sleep cycles with the impact of the interactive screen usage on our sleep. Children who are between the ages of 2 and 6 spend about 4 hours a day in front of a screen. And children who are about 8 to 18 spend about 8 hours in front of a screen. I didn't bother pulling up for adults because it varies in terms of the responsibilities that we have. But that's a lot of time for work, schoolwork, pleasure activities, interacting with others, that is not spent on other enriching experiences throughout our day. And it's especially for the younger ones that pretty optimal time for lots of learning that happens in brain and growth and body development. People who are, and not surprisingly, most of that is handheld screen usage, as that increases in handheld screens. Children who are children who are more sensitive or have a more vulnerable response to things in their environment generally are going to be more likely to be more sensitive to the screens, and especially the screens at night. But in terms of the way that our body system works, if you're more sensitive in many areas, you're more likely to be sensitive to screens and the impact on sleep. So the pathways that affect our sleep. So there's 3 pathways that impact our sleep. So the first one is our eyes. Well, not all mechanisms have a direct impact on sleep. Many of them do. So for our eyes, there's a lot of visual stimulation and sensory overload that is taken in through the eyes of the pathway, and that overactive visual attention, which impacts that calming piece found at bedtime. The electronic excitability of that pathway through our eyes, and that moves to our brain and our body. Increased risk of seizures, of tics, of migraines, of other ailments in our bodies from this visual and electric excitability that pathway. So, and of course, the blue light and the intense light that we often hear about desynchronizes the body clock and suppresses the melatonin that is released in the body, which impacts the sleep and our other hormone levels as well, such as serotonin and dopamine. From a biological perspective, and not necessarily impacting sleep specifically, but the retina in the eye becomes inflamed. And when it's inflamed, it narrows the retinal blood vessels, which is a marker for cardiovascular disease. So, and that that would be that impact of the onset of sleep. The 2D screen When you're looking at a two-dimensional screen, uh, it alters the normal eye movements, um, and and depth perception. So, and that altering of our depth perception impacts our balance and our body position, as well as eye strain. So, younger young children and younger people are more susceptible to the impacts of screens on their developing body and brains. The photons in the eyes are more sensitive, and as they become less sensitive as we age. So if you're thinking as a more a person who's been on this earth longer, oh, it doesn't bother me, so it shouldn't bother my um, young child. Our photons in our eyes um, are more sensitive the younger or the less time that we've been on this earth, and they become less sensitive as we age. So um, just because your experience is don't let your experience of how that light impacts you um, take that consideration of how it might be impacting others eyes. And when we have more sensitive sensory systems or sensory central nervous systems a little bit more dysregulated, whether it be from trauma or attachment or eye surgery. My eyes are more sensitive since I've had some eye surgery. It can be it can be more vulnerable for sure. So our brain is the second point of access for our screen activities. And so while we sleep, our brain is not at rest. It is very active and it has a very important job to do when we sleep. So I talked about the deep sleep and the REM sleep um, and having um, those important pieces during the stages of sleep. So our brain, when we are awake, is designed to respond to visually stimulating input, and we respond to that input um, with that high exciting input um, as a response of flight or flight or fight. So if we visually see a real live bear, our brain and our body go into um, a mode that, okay, what do we need to do? We need to assess the threat and then we need to act on it. So if it's a real bear, you're going to have that um, brain and body response and you're going to do something with it. But when the brain is hijacked into high stimulating activity, visual stimulation of something alerting coming to us through the screen, our body has that same stress response or same response that it would be if a bear were coming at us through that screen. Our body's like, what do we do? And when it's false or when it's not real, we still have that stress hormones running through our body without the release. So we haven't run away from the bear. We haven't fought the bear or we haven't had a response, a release. If we're just seeing something highly stimulating and highly visually activating, and then having no release, that puts that pressure on our brain and our body because there's no release. So that comes with it the hormone of dopamine. So thinking about dopamine is a feel good hormone, and it's released during high pleasure activities. So if that high pleasure activity involves a screen, such as interactive screen time, each time you engage in that pleasant activity, that pleasure activity, more dopamine is released, and that pathway of the reward pathway of the dopamine release is is released and overused. So the more opportunities you have for highly highly engaged pleasure activities, you need more of that same activity to keep the same level of the dopamine release. So to get that same threshold, you need to have more exciting or longer of that same high pleasure activity to get the same amount of that feel good dopamine to release. So we need to, which can be impactful on sleep and making it hard for our brain to move away from sleep. So we need to think about having some low dopamine experiences and activities throughout our day to kind of counterbalance those high dopamine pleasure activities, having some boring, uh, boring things to do, going for a walk, getting outside, kicking a ball, like just low dopamine experience to offset the high dopamine experiences that we're getting. So from the blood in our brain um, impacts the blood flow from our brain. So it's when we have that high visual stimulating activity, the blood flow in the brain moves from the frontal cortex to the lobe development. So the being brace, or our survival brain or lizard brain is. So that keeps us to assess that threat in what we're going to do. So that the more that we're in that state, the more energy is, and the blood flow is in this piece of our brain, or our reptilian brain, or our lizard brain, and it's less opportunities for our frontal cortex to be developed, which impacts our executive functioning, our self-regulation skills, the process to plan and focus and remember, and instructions and multitasking, and resisting impulsive actions or responses. So all those things that are later to develop generally have less opportunities if we're in this reptilian brain. So the blood flow is moving from the front of the brain down to our core, and less opportunities. And there's less integration of those different pathways in our brain if we're going from um, if we're highly activating those high dopamine, high impact, high visual, and we're spending less time developing the parts of the brain used for empathy and flexibility. And so the roads that are being used are getting built bigger and bigger, and in terms of the pathways in our brain, and the ones that aren't being used as much become side roads and smaller roads, and if we're not using them, and our brain is developing differently and not not interconnected and not integrated as well. Oh, sorry. The body. I forgot. I didn't do the body. So it doesn't take much screen time for the body to get revved up, because so many different things are happening at once, and then they just feed off of each other. So like the blood flow into the brain, the blood flow from the rest of the body moves away from our gut and our digestive system and our organs, and it moves towards our heart, and moves towards our legs. So that gets us the adrenaline moving and gets our legs and our arms, limbs ready to fight or flight. So it moves that blood flow away from the gut, from the things that we need for good digestion and functioning of our liver to flush out the toxins, and the different elements of our body is reduced. And then we have those crashes, those sugar cravings, and those crashes as well, because our body system is not working as optimally as it should. So there's a buildup of toxins in our body, and we're reducing how the nutrients that we do take in, how they are absorbed in our body. More muscle aches, and then we have that repressed energy that we've got. We're ready for the bear, we're ready for the fight or flight, but we don't have that release. So we have this repressed energy. So when we're thinking about that's going to impact our quality of sleep if our if if our body system is not working functionally. There are some electromagnetic frequencies in terms of from the screens and from Wi-Fi and from uh, anything really with a plug, but those are emitted into our body. And if we're keeping that Wi-Fi and we're keeping those screens close to us, that's the LED bulbs, the different things that we have in our household. Um, they're they they are a harmful impact on the body. So when we have, so I talked at the beginning, I would be amiss if I didn't talk about some paying attention to our other sleep hygiene for better sleep. So um, thinking about our schedule of sleep, so our timing of sleep. Are we waking and falling asleep at the same-ish time every day? Or are we sleeping in or staying up late? Which causes, and if we fall asleep later or wake up later, more than an hour, it's like traveling without the time, without a time zone change without the travel. So it's like traveling without the traveling every time you stay up late on Saturday night. Sunday night's hard to go to bed. Monday morning's even harder. So, but if we keep a predictable schedule of consistent wake time and bed and sleep time, the timing of sleep allows our body to be more synchronized and work better, which is the other aspect, which impacts the other aspects of our body clock, because our body clock and our circadian rhythms are tied to about 15% of our genes in terms of when to rest, when to digest, and the different hormones that are released in our body that impact overall different aspects and not just sleep. When we talk about routine, I'm talking about a bedtime routine, having a relaxing and consistent, predictable routine that you do each night as you get ready for bed. That really helps to prepare the body to know what's happening next. So in babies as young as 6 weeks, we're starting to look for patterns of predictability in terms of the responses, anticipating a bottle or being fed. That and we look for that patterns of predictability, and that's continues on through our lifespan as humans. So having that, even if it's 3 things that you do predictably before you head to bed, prepares the body. Looking at the bedroom environment, it should be a cool, dark cave, as dark and as cool as you can tolerate it is very conducive to sleep. And then when you're thinking about your daily habits, healthy habits that you do in the daytime, thinking about the caffeine intake that you have, thinking about how much movement, ways to ways to cope with additional stress. If you have allergies, there's caffeine in some allergy medication that you or your child might be taking. All these hidden things that might be impacting your sleep. When you eat and what you eat, and because that's part of the circadian rhythms in our body clocks, they're all synchronizing or desynchronizing. So having a predictable, not only sleep routine, but daytime routine really helps make for better sleep. Makes for better sleep. So I'm going to touch base. I'm going to talk about interactive versus passive screen time. A little drink here. So when I'm talking about interactive screen time, I am talking about anything that you touch to make happen. So whether it be touching a keyboard, a console, like for a video game, anything where your fingers or are you're interacting with your screen is considered interactive. So even a Kobo or a Kindle and e-reader, because you're swiping the screen to touch to move the page along, that's all considered interactive. Passive screen time is the TV across the room that you're passively watching and not interacting with in at any way. And with that, it's not close to you. So it's a passive screen time. So the total amount of screen time is a better predictor of than content. So parents mistakenly believe that like nonviolent video games or nonviolent movies are not harmful, and that educational games give children a boost, which um, it's not true. So it's not giving the brain a boost. Being passive with your screen usage is sometimes seen as lazy. It's not lazy. It's actually better for your brain and your body and your sleep. So while violent content does carry its own risk, it keeps our heart rate variability up, resulting in poor quality of sleep. However, nonviolent content interactively is still too stimulating for the brain to process, especially in large amounts. So the best would be a slower paced TV show or movie that is on a screen across the room, and avoiding anything where you're fast paced or interactive is best. So there was a study where it's looking at sleep disturbances and the difference between interactive and passive screen time. So with the passive screen time, there was a noticeable brain difference in the activity levels of the brain within 20 minutes of interactive screen time. And for passive screen time, that same level of brain activity was 2 hours. So it's about an hour and a half difference of screen usage between passive screen time and active screen time. And this study was done on just children, but they had different ages of children. So they had it at younger, middle, and youth, and looking at what the amount of each of the types of screen usage is, the impact on the body. So 2 hours for passive screen time, there was a difference, and interactive was 20 minutes. So just thinking about those kind of numbers when you're looking at if you're looking at what your current screen usage is, and where you want it to be in terms of that impact of the brain wiring. So less 20 minutes or even less for some brains, if they're sensitive, can cause the brain to go into kind of haywire, being overstimulated and dysregulated. So if you or your child do use screens at bedtime or to fall asleep with, or towards the end of your evening, thinking about why that is. So we don't want to just think about moving it away without exploring what's the draw to it. Is there some fear of the dark? So thinking about if the light from the screen on the TV or handheld device gives them the light that they like to help them fall asleep, thinking about replacing that with a dim um, night light or a bulb that's lower wattage, like 4 to 7 watts, and thinking about the color of red or orange when those red or orange hues when you're thinking about having some night lights. Night lights are okay, especially if you're afraid of the dark or you like to have that lightness in the room. So, um, thinking if you're thinking about a Himalayan salt lamp, that would be like that orange, dim, um, glowy hue that you could replace the TV viewing screen for the light to shift it to something else. Now, if it might be something more sound related that yourself or your child or someone you are in your life, is it the sound of it? So is it the sound of the noise of the TV murmuring as you're falling asleep? So thinking about how you replace what is going on, why is that happening, and replacing it with something better that can replace that noise. So noise machines, you can buy noise machines, or you can put them on your apps on your phone. Use a fan. Listening to music, listening to stories is better than having the screen and the noise from at the handheld device or the TV or whatever the electronic screen might be. When you're thinking about moving away screens from bedtime, creating um, a wind down routine between turning off the screen and your head hitting the pillow. So um, that time between setting a timer of at least an hour before before head hitting the pillow to going from the screens to your head hitting the pillow, creating that new wind down routine. Okay, so I'm going to um, shut the screen off or charge it, move it away at a set time. What am I going to do? Come up with a plan of what is going to happen in that new wind down routine. So it takes a few weeks to get into that habit, um, become habitual for that new wind down routine. Um, but sticking with it and coming up with a plan of what you're going to do in that time. So I myself turn off my screen between 8:30 and 9 o'clock. And then I engage in my wind down routine before I head into my bedtime routine. So knowing that that's my limit that I have on myself, and acting on it and creating what that other wind down routine looks like. And if you're um, have a child or spouse, someone that you're thinking about in terms of negotiating when they can have their screen time, um, negotiating what that cutoff time might be, um, and then implementing the other ideas, the other strategies about the wind down routine, finding the replacements for why they might be using that screen at bedtime to help fall asleep or leading up to that bedtime. And then if you must use screens at night, um, getting some glasses. You can put them in your prescription glasses, blue light blockers. You can put them in your prescription glasses, or you can buy just blue light blockers if you don't have a prescription that um, stop the blue lights from entering the first pathway into your eyes, into your system. So they can be great and useful if if you're in front of the screen a lot during the day, um, whether it be pleasure or work or school. The amount of light as well. How many hours that you are spending in front of a screen, that accumulation during your day does have an impact as well. So if you are finding yourself in front of um, the screen a lot during the day, I would consider wearing them during the day as well as in the evening. Um, absolutely. Using a nighttime mode on your many devices have nighttime modes and settings to reduce the blue light that's emitted. So that just switches the removes the blue and adds more of the red or the purple, more of the those kind of hues. And you can set it, most of them you can set it to specific times, or you can set it to dusk and dawn. As the days get longer and shorter, you can it'll adjust to the daylight in the time zone that you're in, the area that you're in. Um, I download a f.lux f.lux onto my laptop, and it automatically changes all my settings to a set time as well. Or your phones and screens have it. I'm not sure about TVs, new smart TVs. I don't have a smart TV, so I'm not sure of the state of what those that technology is for the big screens. Dimming your whole house light, your whole household lights can be quite beneficial. So we often have blue LED lights in our overhead lights, in our lamps throughout our house. And if you're keeping them on that bright lightness in the evening, that's also a screen. So looking at either changing the light bulbs to more of a warm setting, more of a warm light bulb rather than the blue light bulb, or dimming them and kind of preparing the whole body. It gives the body a bigger cue that nighttime is coming. I think candlelight warm, not blue screen or light warm, cool. That can be helpful in terms of the whole household environment preparing for sleep. Um, and then turning on your do not disturb. So not necessarily the lights at night, but using electronic screens, that fear of missing out or that push notifications, so that you're hearing the ding and you're wanting to pick up the phone, or you're wanting to join with a friend who's playing a video game, or whatever that pull might be to that electronic, shutting it off so that you're not enticed to pick it up and see what you're missing out, because we're wanting to be connected with others, but setting some limits and setting some structure around what that might look like for you. So this is coming to the end. So thinking about the information that I shared with you today, talking about if you're wanting to make some changes around the screen usage during the day and at night, talking about that, the first step would be to talk about that with your supports around you, who's in your household, who's in your life, who might want to do this with you, who might want to make this challenge and change with you. Decide what you're going to do, so what you're write it out, put it on sticky notes on top of your phone, so that you're being mindful and thinking about and intentional. That's my word for this year, intentional. And being intentional, write out what your plan is going to look like, what your boundaries are. So I wrote down, I will plug in my phone away from my bed at 8:30 each night, kind of thing, and decide what my limits and my boundaries are. If you're making big changes, such as screens at bedtime, and as part of that bedtime routine or habit, just thinking about when you're going to start. As the days are getting longer now, and we're having light after dinner, now is a great time to think about what can you do instead of moving to a screen after dinner. Moving outside, there's some great things that are having light outside is great for making those adjustments and those changes. what are we going to do? Thinking about what's happening in your life. Is there going to be a move? Is there going to be a big disruption or a change? Thinking about when it's conducive to make those changes, when you're going to start. And then when you do, track that progress. So if the reasons why you're doing it is that you're not sleeping well, or you're noticing you're uh, more moody, or difficulty with making shifts, or making friends, or making eye contact, um, whatever you're noticing about your difficulty with sleep, what you want to change, have those goals written out and then track the progress. Are you having less mood dysregulation during the day? Are you able to shift gears more easily? Are you falling asleep quicker? Are you staying asleep longer? Tracking that progress in a sleep log can be really time telling in terms of um, tracking that progress in the nights that maybe didn't go as well. Was there a relation to that? You know, was there was there a video game thing happening that night, or you video called with somebody, and seeing what that impact is, and giving it some time. Um, it takes it takes at least 3 days to kind of move away from the physical body experiences of the body and the brain and the eyes, in terms of the pathways of the screens on sleep. Um, some will notice a difference after a day in terms of that reduction, but it depends on that sensitivity of the individual, and there is that residual. So the brain needs to kind of come down off of that visual stimulation and reorganize and think and process things differently. So it takes some time. So if you have any questions, since this is a recording, please feel free to reach out to me. And here's my contact information. If you are interested in working with me, if you want to hear more about what it would be like to work with me, I have a 20-minute free consultation call to kind of explore what's going on with your sleep and find out what it's like to work with me. I do work, every family that I work with is unique. I don't have a plan or a method or a way. It's all individual in terms of what's going on and what works for you as a person, as a parent, temperament, and your family situation. So if you're interested in looking at doing a reset, so kind of looking at either reducing or removing screens, I would be happy to. Um, I would be happy if you reached out for me to help you, to support you through that, and see if that's maybe making a difference for your family and sleep. So, if there's another topic of interest that you would like to hear about, and please feel free to reach out to me as well. And thank you for joining me. Bye bye.